be out of focus. Up, maybe that's a little bit better.
How many of those trains do you have?
So we have 4 trains operating at the same time. We've expanded over the years, and maybe I'll tell you a little bit about our history. It might be interesting to note. In 1990, Via Rail was operating the tracks between CP rail tracks between Vancouver and Banff, and we'll take a look at that. Actually, let me show you on the map. So this orange line right here, this was operated for many, many years by government operations, right? And they were losing a lot of money. And they said, let's get this off our hands. We don't need any rent in our books. And so they went on a public bid, and Mr. Armstrong, just a fellow Canadian from Vancouver, said, I have an idea. Got some friends together, they had a little bit of money, they bid, and they won the bid. And then they had to rush to go buy some rail cars, give them a paint job, hire staff, and try to figure out what they were going to do with this contract. And they, first year of operation was definitely different than what we see today. But it started off with just one train consist, with just a few rail cars. And then they added rail cars. As they made money, they reinvested and reinvested. And then they added different routes. And then they started designing their own rail cars. And that's evolved over the years. So 26 years later, all the rail cars today are custom designed with glass ceilings on routes that most of the routes are all exclusive to Rocky Mountaineer. From a leisure train point of view, there's no other leisure train operating on these tracks except for just a few portions.
I was just concerned, you have four trains, are they all using the same track at different times?
So if you look at the map here, we would have, let's say, one train on the orange line, one train on this blue line, one train on the green line, and a 4th train operating between Vancouver and Seattle. So they're really spread out.
But they're different tracks, though.
They're all different tracks. And so we share the tracks with CP and CN trains. So we didn't lay the tracks. We use the tracks, and just like an airport, we're constantly communicating with a control tower that's based in Calgary. And so we have some employees, their full-time job is making sure that we don't have any train delays, because we can see where the trains are and where we should be and where they should be. And oh, there's a 5-minute delay. Let's go this way, let's go that way. Okay? That's a great question. So let's take a look at just some of the views, and we'll get into the class of service. But here you can see some of our GoldLeaf dome rail cars. So we have 2 classes of service. We have Silverleaf and we have GoldLeaf. In 2015, we eliminated what was the founder's kind of baby project, the Red Leaf. And it took us a while because, when you create something, you don't want to let it go. But the Red Leaf is what really looked like a standard train. And so we got rid of that in 2015. And it created a lot of brouhaha because it was our kind of lowest price point. And so a lot of people in the company were scared that we were going to be losing a lot of money and losing a lot of customers. And what ended up happening was the opposite. We had just a more clear marketing message with a clear demographic. We're going for a certain formula. And so you can see from the map here, the routes that I was talking about, they have all these fancy names, right? If you look at our brochure, First Passage to the West, Journey Through the Clouds, Rainforest to Gold Rush, and Coastal Passage. And then if you look at packages, we have even more long extended names. But the basics of the Rocky Mountaineer is that we're taking 2 or 3 days on the train. So let's say this blue line, that's 2 days on the train, with the nights being in Jasper, Kamloops, and Vancouver. Right? That could be going eastbound, could be going westbound. And to that, we'll add visits in and around Vancouver, and in and around Jasper, Lake Louise, Banff, Calgary, and then maybe fly back home. So that could be what I just described. That could be a 7-day trip, that could be a 15-day trip. It's up to you, because maybe you're staying 2-3 nights in Jasper as opposed to just 1. And then 2-3 nights in Lake Louise, and 2-3 nights in Banff, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility. So I like to make that comparison with a cruise because of the momentum or the formula of the experience. But where we differ, which is an advantage to you, is that you can customize your trip. So Sheila referred to a departure that we're going to be telling you about tonight. So those are basically the 2 I guess, the two different silos of how you can experience the Rocky Mountaineer. Either you go with a set itinerary and you follow Sheila that has already organized everything in a really intelligent way, and we'll get to that tonight. Or you say, you know what, I'm going to do this on my own. These are my dates. This is what I want to do. I've already seen Banff, for example, so I don't want to stay too long over there. I'd rather spend more time in Jasper because I didn't get to see as much as I wanted last time, etc., etc. Just as an example, right? So the yellow line between Calgary and Jasper, these are roads. There are no tracks here. So this has to be done either in a private vehicle, so you're with Sheila, she has a bus for your group, or you're taking a standard bus tour because you're just traveling two of you, or you're traveling alone with other clients, so you're taking a standard kind of tour between point A and point B, or you rent a car. You're in Jasper and you rent a car between Jasper and Calgary where you drop it off a week later. That's a possibility as well. So different ways, different options. I'm not going to show you this video because I want to save time for questions, and I want to make sure that we don't go over too many details on the product. And so, because there's so many different ways of setting up the Rocky Mountaineer, the brochure, in my opinion, it's kind of not something I would want you to have on your tables right now. Because when you open that brochure, there's so many different options, you can easily get lost. I've had people actually tell me, you know, Anthony, I went through the whole brochure, I still don't know where to start. What do you recommend? There's so much information in that. And the brochure that you have is really something that is a tool for Sheila. She can use that because she's been on board the train and she can customize the itinerary for you. This is definitely the type of experience that you want an expert to help construct or build your package for you. So Coastal Passage, we talked about it. That's the portion between Vancouver and Seattle. So can anybody guess why we expanded into the U.S.? For the American market, that makes sense. It's a huge growing market for us. But there's two really important reasons. The first one, I mentioned it already. Our guests are cruisers. Well, guess what the number one port of call for Alaska is? Seattle. It's not Vancouver. So a lot of our guests were doing the Rocky Mountaineer, and then they were going on to Alaska from Seattle, and we had nothing to offer them between Vancouver and Seattle. The second reason, a lot of our guests will come back from the experience and say, you know what, I loved it, but I'm disappointed. It was too short. The portion of Rocky Mountaineer, the 2 days on board, I thought it was going to be enough. But when I lived it, 2 days went by so quickly, I wish I had a third day or a fourth day on board. And the only other option we had before we created this Vancouver-Seattle, the only other way to do more than 2 days was to do a full circle journey. So you'd have to, go from Calgary to Vancouver, then come back to Calgary. And that didn't always work with the logistics, especially if you're doing a trip to Alaska. So more days on the train and connecting with the Alaskan cruisers of this world. Alaskan cruisers, believe it or not, 50% of our guests are taking an Alaskan cruise. Imagine if you're sitting on our train, ask around. Half the people on your rail car are just getting off or are going to be getting on a ship. Rainforest to Gold Rush, that's the line that kind of really disconnects. It's going through Quesnel and Whistler, so it's really disconnecting from civilization. And this line, we extended it to be a 3-day route in 2016. Again, we weren't sure how that was going to work. And it's one of the routes that sells out the first before the other ones because people want 3 days in a row on the train. So we're seeing if we're going to be changing some of our packages in the future because more and more of our guests are taking circle journeys and these 3-day journeys. First passage to the west, it's that original route I was telling you about that we took over from Via Rail. So we still use it today. It has a lot of historic sites. And I think a lot of people from Australia and the UK, they look at the map and they see Banff, so they say, okay, yeah, that's where I want to go. But they don't realize that you don't see Banff from the train. Okay? When you're on the train, or you don't see Lake Louise, the lake, you really have to be in the Chateau Lake Louise, or in the lobby or in front of it to see the lake. So from the train itself, beautiful scenery, definitely, but it's very much based on history. Journey Through the Clouds is a really interesting route, and in taking over the Eastern Canadian market for Rocky Mountaineer, I've inherited some markets that are not that familiar with Rocky Mountaineer, which is I found interesting because a lot of them are they're latching onto the Journey Through the Clouds route and suggesting that to their guests. I'm talking about the travel consultants. And I think they see the logic. If you're going to go through Jasper, why not take the line that goes directly or leaves from Jasper instead of going to Banff and driving up to Jasper and then driving back through Lake Louise and Banff to get back to the airport? It just doesn't make sense logistically. And Jasper is kind of like the hidden gem of the Rockies, right? Everybody's like, oh yeah, I almost forgot about Jasper. Everybody